the prayer and for worship leading this morning. Appreciate that. Thank you, Cheryl, for the scripture reading, and we look forward to you and others when you can come and worship with us in person and you can feel safe. Colton, thanks for the children's story, being courageous and doing that. I love it. I appreciate it. What did you say about conflict? Because we always want to be right. Oh, amen? And if we take a back seat, we do like being right. And I think many of us have an addiction to being right sometimes. And I loved the song Worship Team that we sang, Here by the Water. Don't miss that lyric. The second verse really touched me. I know it was stormy. Hope it was for me a learning. Blood on the road wasn't mine though. Someone that I know walked here before. Jesus knows suffering. Jesus knows conflict. Jesus knows that stuff, and he can help us. And that's one of my takeaways from the hymn this morning, and I appreciate that. And church, thank you for all the cards, blessings, for pastor appreciation, and for birthday. Happy birthday during church being sung to the pastor. It's not my favorite thing. That's why I said what I said. But I get the heart intent, so thank you. You don't turn double nickels every day. So, here I am. Here we go. 55 is the new 45, right? So, embracing that. So, church, I believe that times of renewal and restoration are very important. So it's the first slide this morning. The Lord restores my soul. Yahweh leads me in right paths for God's glory, and you'll recognize that from Psalm 23. So the picture I took last weekend when Kendra and the kids and I, we went out to Lake Canopolis. Isn't that a beautiful picture, right? So there we are in our inflatable kayak that helps us also be restored and relaxed. And so I'm thankful for those of you who prayed that we would have meaningful time. We did. But hear this from Psalm 23. And this is for all of us and has been for all of us for a long time. The Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want. Yahweh makes us lie down in green pastures. The Lord leads us beside quiet waters. The Lord restores our soul. And then the psalm says, the Lord leads us in right paths for his name's sake. Even though we walk through the darkest valley, we do not have to fear evil, for the Lord is with us. Church, I believe times of refreshment and renewal help us do the right thing. Did you hear that in the psalm? The Lord leads me in right paths. It happens after the Lord leads us beside still waters and restores our souls. When we pay attention to Sabbath and to rest and restoration and emotional health and peace, it's a whole lot easier to do the right thing. That's what I'm looking at here. It's also a whole lot easier to go through the darkest valley when you've taken and are taking times of restoration and rest and Sabbath. Y'all know Sabbath and rest is in the Bible, right? Amen? Okay, just checking. I didn't make this up. I'm telling you what God has shared with us, his people, so we can have more advantages, more help in our life. Restored souls are better able to find and go in right paths. Restored souls are better able to face dark valleys. Amen? I'm going to invite us to stand and let's take a few moments to acknowledge each other. We can acknowledge our brothers and sisters who are at the villa or who are watching later. So I have continued to be glad that Don Weaver has led the vision update, the vision meeting we had as leadership, and he's provided updates. And many of you have looked at the handout that came electronically, and there's also a hard copy. And we're going to continue to pay attention to this. This is important for us as a church as we move in the same direction. But I wanted to just draw attention to a couple things. There's one section called the top 5 characteristics. And as the leaders got together, we were told to make a headline, a slogan that kind of describes the church. I don't want you to miss it. I like the first one. It said HMC, Heston Mennonite Church, imperfect and diverse followers of Jesus who are caring, generous, and family-oriented. I thought that slogan was strong. I don't know, I was especially struck by the imperfect one. No reaction. Okay. We are imperfect. We got to keep working at stuff, and I like that. Also, a couple pages later, there were 5 goals that were listed that we're specifically working at, or 6 of them. And the first one that as leaders we talked about this year, we want to work at increasing engagement. And that's in our activities and locations, so that there's more of a balance of persons in person and virtual, that there's a balance, and we're paying attention to what we need, not just not doing something, thinking about what can we do. And so also in those goals, you'll see there's the leverage gift survey that's already happened. We're looking at wanting more people in the pews on Sunday morning and looking around. It's looking great this morning. Well done, church. And so we're trying to increase engagement this year. That's one of the goals. And that's an everybody thing, not just 1 or 2. So thank you, Don, for keeping that in front of us. And church, pay attention to that. What does that mean for you and for us as we keep moving forward? I also want to add, I appreciated Clarence preaching last Sunday. And I heard him name clearly that conflict is common. Anybody else hear that last week? Clarence said that. And to hear an experienced pastor say conflict is common, that gave me a good jumping off point for today's message. Unfortunately, I would add, not only is conflict common, conflict is inevitable. Whether in church or in our families, conflict is common and inevitable. So I'm going there for the next several minutes or so and invite you to look for something that can help you for your situation, whether it's home, whether it's extended family, whether it's work, whether it's church or beyond. So the next slide this morning, I have a question. Complete wholeness is not attainable. Life without conflict is impossible. And so my question is, do you agree or disagree? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. Because I would never want you to think that I coerce you into listening. Complete wholeness is not attainable. Life without conflict is impossible. Anybody agree? Okay, I see several hands. Anybody disagree? Okay. Anybody not voting? Gotcha. It's kind of like Simon Says. But yeah, there are several hands not raised as well. So I have several books in my office about conflict and healthy congregations and healthy families. And so for this message, I'm bringing out a couple of them. So this one is called Healthy Congregations, a Systems Approach by Peter Steinke. And one of the things he writes some principles of health and disease, and he ties them into family or church situations. So one of the things he writes, the first thing is, he names that complete wholeness is not attainable. Perfection is impossible. And I add, there are no perfect churches or families. And instead of thinking of that as a negative, take a deep breath and go, okay. We don't have to set an unrealistic expectation for ourselves and our families. But I like how Stinky says, but it can be approximated. So we can have some hope. We can work at things so they can be good and better. Second thing he writes about health and disease. Illness, and I add conflict, happen even to the healthy. These are realities. We need not view disease or conflict as signs of weakness. Just because there's conflict or illness, we don't assume that everything is wrong or bad. Does that make sense? Okay. And a third thing, he writes, just as the body has innate healing abilities, we talk about immunity in our bodies, innate healing abilities. Makes me think the church, the body of Christ, also has internal ways to heal. We need to let them do their work. We have healthy structures that help healing in the churches. We have timetables. We don't rush into things, but maybe sometimes we take too long, so we need people to push that along. We have communication streams. These things help healing in the church. So let's peek at Acts 15 again, the text that Cheryl read for us. And I'm going to start at verse 36 on Acts 15. And note that this follows up the Jerusalem council and all the hard work of issues and struggle and coming up with how they're going to function as a church. And this follows what Clarence was preaching on last week. So verse 36 reads, after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, come, let's return and visit the believers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are doing. I'm thinking Paul's getting a little bit antsy. He's ready. He's ready to go. We did all this structural work with the Jerusalem council and all that conversation stuff. Let's get moving. Verse 37. But Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark. But Paul decided not to take with them one who had deserted them in Pamphylia and then had not accompanied them in the work. Plain and simple, Paul was ticked at John Mark. No, he ain't coming along. No, he bailed on us. Let's leave his behind. Verse 39. The disagreement became so sharp over John Mark. The disagreement became so sharp, they parted company. So I have a couple thoughts. I think Paul and Barnabas were exhausted from all that conflict communication work done at the Jerusalem council, so that a small thing became a big thing. And that's the next slide this morning. Church, be aware of the conflicts and struggles that arise after a season of intense, hard work processing. Little conflicts can become bigger conflicts, especially with fatigue, stress, and anxiety. I believe this is true of churches. Does that make sense in churches? We come through a hard time of intense processing. Then little things can become big things. You're just tired. I think this maybe happens in families. Extended families? Yeah. Couples? Beware, couples. Church, I believe this is another reason why God emphasizes Sabbath, rest, worship, restoration. If we're not rested, we become more irritable. We're not our best selves. In family, in church, at work. And especially when we work hard at something. You with me, church? Okay. Yeah, I feel you thinking with me, and that's good. So next slide I have this morning. So I also believe denial of problems and denial of conflict in churches or families don't make them go away. So you see the garbage pile over there. I heard the quote this week. The garbage does not smell any better just because you wait to take it out. That's with the garbage. Denial of problems and conflicts in churches or families don't make them go away. Have you ever been guilty of that? Yeah, I don't want to talk to so-and-so. I don't want to have to do this or that. Maybe it'll just fix itself. Rarely does that work. Sometimes we have to take a deep breath and move towards a situation. So another book that I look at that gives me some instruction is this book called Healing the Dysfunctional Church Family. And the author of this one is David Maines. And I like how he writes, denial of problems in families, and I add churches, doesn't make the pain and struggle go away. And he writes, and the after effects can go on for decades when we live in denial. He writes, healthy families and churches, I add, work toward the ideal of honesty in all their relationships. So church, this is why one of my visions for Heston Mennonite Church, while I am pastor here, is that we can become more trusting of each other, that we can communicate more and better, that we can be honest with each other. And I hope that when my time is done as pastor of Heston Mennonite Church, you all as a church can look back and go, you know, just helped us communicate more. Just helped us trust each other better, even though we don't see eye to eye politically or whatever. But there's still a place for trust. Just helped us be a little more honest towards ourselves and to each other. But here's the tricky thing, especially when you're talking about vision and goals. How do you measure that? How do you measure we've made improvement communicating and trusting and being honest? I'd say you kind of know it when you have it, and you kind of know it when you don't have it. And I want to say, church, I want more of that here at Heston Mennonite Church. Don't you? So we're looking at these goals. For part of it is so we can be more on the same page. So visualize this sphere of Heston Mennonite Church. And we want people who are committed to walking in the way of what God is doing with Heston Mennonite Church, but an aspect of communicating, being more honest, more trusting in this sphere. And in this sphere, there's room for all kinds of people. There's room for progressive people. There's room for conservative people. But you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to communicate. You have to be willing to trust. And that's what I envision with Heston Mennonite Church, with our goals that we've written on paper as a part of that. That's part of the challenge. I believe we'll know it as it happens. And may we improve in that this year and next year and the years ahead. So Maines also writes about denial in a different kind of way. And I find this interesting because it also speaks to honesty. He writes, "It's funny, isn't it? In the church, we know we're all sinners. The only problem is, nobody admits what his or her particular sin happens to be. In Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, a person will say, 'Hello, I'm Jess, I'm an alcoholic.' That's the reality factor. But in church, we won't say up front, 'Hi, I'm David. I'm an addict. My problem is that I have an inordinate need for affirmation.' Or, 'I'm Betty. I tend to be a crybaby and fussy all the time.' Or, 'I'm Bill. I have a problem with lust.' Or, 'I'm Jill. My tongue can get out of control if I'm not careful.'" Maines continues, "One of the problems with the contemporary church is that it's structured in such a way that openness and honesty are difficult to come by." Church, this is why Sunday school, small groups, and other gatherings of people are so important. So you can develop a trust and a communication with a smaller group of people. You can be honest about what you struggle with. And you can count on those people to pray for you, to hold you, to help you. And then you in turn can do that for someone else because they're not perfect either. Church, I want to encourage you, if you've stopped meeting in Sunday schools, to get them going again. I think that's important for your soul, for your health. And if you haven't been in a Sunday school, why don't you start one? Or start a small group. So Kendra and I, we've been married not quite 2.5 years. And we're like, wouldn't it be interesting to form a group, small group, with a couple of people who haven't been married very long? And maybe people who are even a little bit older. So we looked at who we could invite to be a part of that. And we're getting that going. What's it for you? You don't have to meet every week all the time. Although if you have the room and the space and the need, do that. But it's huge to find a group, a place where you can communicate, where you can be honest, where you can know people are praying for you and you are praying for them. I want to return back to Acts 15. Verse 39 again. The disagreement became so sharp that Paul and Barnabas parted company. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and set out, the believers commending him to the grace of the Lord. They went through Syria, Cilicia, strengthening the churches. So one response I have, and it's this next slide. And this is a little bit more of a positive response. So one of my takeaways from that is Paul and Silas go in this direction, Barnabas and John Mark go in that direction. I praise God that we don't have to be perfect to be used by God. That guy right there, he's not perfect, but he can be used by God. So this picture was taken at South Central Mennonite Conference. There's communion going on. It was actually, for me, one of the highlights of South Central Mennonite Conference. And I assure you, there are many people in this picture who are not perfect, who are also being used by God. So one of my takeaways of this disagreement is that God's still going to use people. And I think that's amazing. And I praise God for that. And some of you have maybe even heard me pray that in our pre-worship meeting. One way I'll pray is, God, I thank you that we don't have to be perfect to be used by God. And it's true. And I say that to you all. Some of you hold back maybe because, well, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with this. Well, if you're honest with that, God can still use you and needs you. Because the people we have serving the church now, I assure you, are not perfect people. Kay notwithstanding. I love Kay that she can take a joke. And she gives it as good as she takes it. So. But I want to admit that actually this disagreement through the years of Paul and Barnabas, it makes me kind of sad. It makes me sad because I like to think people can work their issues out, right? If you're honest enough, if you communicate enough, if you trust enough, you can work stuff out. Don't you? Don't you want to think that? So I read this separation with a bit of disappointment. I grieve that Paul and Barnabas couldn't work this out. I like to think they could have worked it out. But they didn't. Church, they didn't. And sometimes that happens too. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And we grieve that for others. I grieve that here. And that's part of life. But let's not give up on reconciliation, right? Let's not give up on it. Just because this text or other situations we know where things didn't work out. We don't give up on reconciliation. Amen? We know splits and breakups happen, but that doesn't mean we need to give up on reconciliation. I want to share a story. When I was at seminary 20 plus years ago, there was a particular professor that he and I didn't see eye to eye. And so we had several discussions, you know what I mean? I wasn't his favorite person, he wasn't mine, and we went after it. Then I remember one time, this would have been my third year at seminary, we were doing a special foot washing service there in the chapel at Eastern Mennonite Seminary. And I'm sitting there, preparing myself for foot washing. Who sits down beside me? This professor. And I'm thinking, crap. I don't want him touching me. I don't want to touch him. Then the Spirit does the Spirit's work, right? And it became obvious that there was no way to sneak out of this, right? So he ended up washing my feet, and I ended up washing his feet, and something happened. And I want to tell you that we didn't become buddy-buddy after that, but we could have conversations. So then fast forward 10 years, I go on, I moved to Ohio, and I came back to Eastern Mennonite Seminary for, they have these pastors' weeks that you go and you get some training and so forth. I went back for that. Plus, my parents live there in the area, and so it's a combination of checking in with them. I'm walking in the neighborhood where my dad was living, and I see this professor. And something's off about him. He's got a weird gait, and we talk a little bit. And then I find out later he has Parkinson's. And he wasn't an old guy. He was probably 10 years old. Well, some of you would say that's an old guy, right? And so last year, he died from complications with Parkinson's and so forth. But I was humbled by how I learned something about reconciliation through him, through this whole process, and then also what it meant 10 years down the road for me. So I believe in reconciliation, even in the face of stories like this when I know things don't work out well. So there are many other things that could be said about conflict and conflict resolution, and I have more books in my office. But I do want to share one more thing from this book that I think is relevant, and it goes with the next slide. The idea is be aware of viruses that can turn congregations in bad directions. And again, this is from the Steinke book. He names 4 viruses that are potentially virulent and can turn a congregation into a hot anxiety zone. So I throw these out to you to hold, to consider, to resist. We have ways that we resist the coronavirus, COVID-19, right? Let's also have passion to resist viruses that would destroy or look to destroy our congregation. First virus that Stinky names is the virus of secrets, of gossiping, whispering. Did you hear? Did you hear? And you can say that about churches. You can say that about communities. You can say that about extended families. The virus of secrets. Second one he names is accusations. The virus of accusations, blaming and fault-finding. I love Ephesians 6:12, where Paul writes to the church at Ephesus. He writes, "For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh." Our enemy is not against humans, but against the rulers, against the authorities, the cosmic powers of darkness. Look out for the virus of accusations, of blaming and fault-finding. Third one, Stanky writes, look out for the virus of lies and deception. And included in that would be half-truths. Don't give half the story when you know the whole story, or at least 3/4 of the story is going to help. There's an aspect of lying and deceiving by only partially sharing, and you have to discern that. And the fourth virus that Steinke names is triangulation. It's shifting burdens elsewhere. It's someone who should be talking to this person, but then they talk to this person, then this person has to talk to this person. That's exhausting. And things get dropped in the process. Stinky writes, not stinky, Stinky. Thank you for listening. He says these anxieties are all expressions of the virus of anxiety. The presence of secrets or triangles are not themselves the disease. Rather, secrets and triangles enable the disease process. The disease requires a combination of the secrecy and the host cells, the people who permit them to exist. So viruses will come. But how will we and how will we resist them? How are we going to deal with them? Are we going to acknowledge them? Are we going to resist them? The viruses of secrets, accusations, of lies, and of triangulation. Be aware of viruses that turn congregations. Church, let us not live in darkness with its potential secrecy, blaming, deception, denial. Let's commit to we want to be a healthy church with truth-telling, with listening, with communication that goes back and forth. Oh, I'd never thought of that. Oh, yeah. With trust increasing. This doesn't happen fast, but it can happen as more of us are intentional and deliberate about it. Let's be a people who communicate and work together. So John 12:46 reads, it's the last slide. So here in the picture, you see the light. And if you look real close, there's a person sitting on the picnic table. I invite you to consider yourself the person at the picnic table. Jesus says, I have come as light into the world so that everyone who believes should not remain in darkness. We can have light from Jesus to help us in our families, in our marriages, in our places of employment, in our church, that help us be healthy. Let's pray. Jesus, be our light. Open our tired eyes into conflict. Open our eyes to ways to have reconciliation, ways to resist conflict, to be aware, to know when we're tired and not going to make the best decisions. Help us as individuals, as families, as a church. Jesus, be our light as we keep stepping into the future. I pray in Jesus' name. And everybody